While one woman's screams of agony echoed through a sterile hospital room, a testament to the miracle of life, another woman's laughter sparkled over the rim of a champagne flute, a toast to a future she believed was stolen and secured. This isn't just a story of a wife, a husband, and a mistress. It's the story of a meticulously laid trap, a father's undying love from beyond the grave, and a set of fortune papers that held not predictions, but the cold, hard power of justice. What happens when a celebration of betrayal collides with a legacy of protection? The answer lies in a courtroom where one judge's voice would shatter a carefully constructed empire of lies. Stay with me, because the final twist is one nobody saw coming. The rain began its assault on the panoramic windows of the Davenport mansion just as the first real contraction seized Amelia. It was a sharp, breathtaking clench that stole the air from her lungs and sent a jolt of pure primal fear through her. She gripped the cold marble of the kitchen island, her knuckles turning white. The baby, or rather the babies, were coming. Triplets. A 1 in 10,000 chance, the doctors had said. A miracle. To her husband, Julian Davenport, they were a legacy. 3 heirs at once, Amelia. He had beamed his handsome face, a mask of patriarchal pride. The Davenport name is secured for a generation. But lately that mask had been slipping. She fumbled for her phone, her fingers trembling as she scrolled to his name. The call went straight to voicemail. "Julian, it's happening." She breathed into the phone, another wave of pain cresting. "The contractions are 10 minutes apart. Please, please come home. I need you." She tried again. Voicemail. A third time. Voicemail. A cold dread, colder than the November rain lashing against the glass, seeped into her heart. He was supposed to be at a critical late-night merger meeting downtown, but his excuses had become tissue-thin over the past few months. The scent of an unfamiliar, cloyingly sweet perfume on his suit jackets, the hushed, angry phone calls he'd take in his study, the door firmly locked. The way his eyes, once so full of adoration for her, now seemed to look straight through her, as if she were just another piece of expensive furniture in his perfectly curated life. Amelia, heiress to the formidable sterling fortune, had married for love. Her father, the late and legendary businessman Robert Sterling, had been skeptical of Julian from the start. "Men like him don't see a woman, Amelia," he had warned her gently just a month before he passed away. "They see a balance sheet. Be careful." She had dismissed it as a father's overprotectiveness. Julian was charming, ambitious, and utterly devoted. Or so she had thought. Now alone in their cavernous, silent mansion, her body twisting in pain, her father's words echoed in her mind like a prophecy. She managed to call her sister Sarah, her voice cracking with pain and unshed tears. "Sarah, it's time, and I can't reach Julian." "That son of a bitch," Sarah's voice was pure venom. "I'm on my way. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Hold on, Amelia. Just breathe. Breathe for your babies." As Sarah's car pulled up the long, sweeping driveway, its headlights cutting through the deluge, Amelia had a fleeting, terrifying thought. This wasn't just the beginning of her journey into motherhood. It was the end of her life as she knew it. Julian wasn't at a business meeting. She knew it in her bones. He was somewhere else with someone else, and the birth of his 3 children wasn't even a footnote in his evening plans. The delivery room. The world had shrunk to the 4 white walls of the delivery suite at Lenox Hill Hospital. The rhythmic beeping of monitors was the soundtrack to Amelia's agony. Sarah was a rock by her side, holding her hand, wiping her brow with a cool cloth, her voice a steady murmur of encouragement. "You're doing amazing, Amy. You're so strong." But every excruciating contraction was a reminder of who wasn't there. The space beside her where her husband should have been felt like a physical void. The nurses exchanged sympathetic, knowing glances. They had seen this story before. The wealthy, busy husband who was nowhere to be found when it mattered most. Hours bled into one another. Amelia's body was a war zone. The doctors spoke in urgent, calm tones about fetal distress and the possibility of an emergency C-section. The triplets were impatient. Through the haze of pain, Amelia's resolve hardened. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for 3 tiny, innocent lives who deserved more than a father who couldn't be bothered to witness their birth. She would be enough for them. She had to be. The penthouse. Across town, in a sleek Tribeca penthouse with breathtaking views of the city skyline, the only sound was the pop of a champagne cork. Julian Davenport raised his crystal flute, his arm draped possessively around a stunning raven-haired woman in a red silk dress. Her name was Chloe Vance. "To us, my love," Julian said, his voice smooth as velvet. "To our new beginning. The end of the old, the dawn of the new." Chloe clinked her glass against his, her laughter bright and brittle. "And to the 3 little trust funds about to make their grand entrance," she purred, taking a delicate sip. "Are you sure she can't reach you?" "The phone is off. My assistant is fielding all calls with the unreachable in a board meeting line," Julian said with a dismissive wave of his hand. "By the time I grace them with my presence tomorrow, she'll be too exhausted and emotional to do anything but sign the papers." On a low glass table lay a sheaf of documents neatly bound. Divorce papers, and next to them a property prospectus for a sprawling estate in the Hamptons. "I still can't believe her father was so foolish," Chloe mused, tracing the rim of her glass. "A simple ironclad prenup, half of everything she personally inherited after the wedding. He must be rolling in his grave." "Robert Sterling was a dinosaur," Julian scoffed. "He thought his little girl married for love. He didn't account for the fact that I have a much better offer." He pulled Chloe closer, kissing her deeply. "You are my future, Chloe. The houses, the jets, the life Amelia was too. Boring to truly enjoy. That's all for you." Chloe smiled, a triumphant, predatory gleam in her eyes. "Poor Amelia. Stuck in a hospital bed getting fat and frumpy while we're here planning our life. It's almost too cruel." "It's not cruel," Julian corrected her, his voice turning cold and serious. "It's business. She served her purpose. She provided the heirs. Now her fortune will provide our lifestyle. It's a perfectly symbiotic relationship." They drank more champagne, their laughter echoing in the opulent, empty penthouse. They mapped out their future spending Amelia's inheritance on yachts and diamonds, blissfully unaware of the storm gathering on the horizon. They believed they had accounted for every variable, every legal loophole. They had underestimated only one thing: the ferocious, protective love of a father for his only daughter. At 3:17 a.m., after 14 hours of grueling labor, the world changed forever. Liam Sterling Davenport was the first to arrive, a tiny, perfect creature with a surprisingly strong cry. 2 minutes later, he was followed by his sister, Olivia Sterling Davenport. And finally, at 3:22 a.m., came Noah Sterling Davenport, the smallest of the 3, but with a firm, determined grip on the doctor's finger. Amelia, exhausted, but overcome with a love so fierce, it felt like it could reshape the world, wept as they placed her babies on her chest. They were here. They were real, her children. She looked at their tiny faces, their tufts of dark hair, their impossibly small fingers and toes. In that moment, Julie and Chloe, the betrayal, it all faded into a distant hum. All that mattered were these three souls who depended on her completely. Sarah was crying beside her, snapping pictures with her phone. "They're beautiful, Amy. Absolutely perfect. You did it." It was nearly noon when Julian finally deigned to appear. He strode into the private hospital room, not with flowers or apologies, but with a briefcase and an unnerving, placid smile. He looked less like a new father and more like a CEO arriving to close a deal. He glanced perfunctorily at the three bassinets lined up against the wall. "Healthy, I trust?" he asked, his tone detached. "They're perfect," Amelia said, her voice quiet but laced with steel. "No thanks to you." "Amelia, please." He sighed, sitting in the chair by her bed. "Let's not be emotional. I was in a once-in-a-lifetime negotiation. This secures our future. All of our futures." "Don't you lie to me, Julian," she said, her eyes locking onto his. "Not anymore. I know you weren't in a meeting." Julian's smile didn't waver. It was chilling. He simply reached into his briefcase and pulled out the bound set of documents she had seen in her mind's eye. He placed them on her bedside table. "You're right," he said smoothly. "There's no point in lying anymore. It's time for us to be honest. Our marriage has been over for some time. I've met someone else. I'm filing for divorce." Amelia felt the blood drain from her face, but she refused to give him the satisfaction of tears. "On the day your children are born, you're serving me divorce papers on the day our triplets are born." "It's the cleanest way," he said, his voice devoid of any emotion. "We handle this amicably for the children's sake. The prenup is very clear. I'm entitled to 50% of all assets and value accrued during the marriage. Given the recent performance of the sterling industry stock you inherited, that's a considerable sum. It will be more than enough for me to start my new life, and you will be more than comfortable." He stood up, adjusting the cuffs of his expensive shirt. "My lawyer will be in touch with yours. Just sign the papers, Amelia. Don't make this difficult. It's better for everyone." He thought he was delivering the final killing blow. He saw her as weak, emotional, and utterly defeated. He expected her to break down, to plead, to rage. Instead, a slow, strange smile touched Amelia's lips. It was a watery, weary smile, but it was genuine. For the first time in a long time, the fog of uncertainty lifted. The path forward was suddenly brutally clear. "My lawyer," she said, her voice gaining strength, "is named Arthur Harrison. He was my father's lawyer for 30 years. I think you'll find he's already quite familiar with our prenup." Julian's confident expression flickered for the barest of seconds. A flicker of confusion. "Fine. It's a standard document. Any competent lawyer can read it." "Oh, I'm sure they can," Amelia replied, her gaze drifting to her 3 sleeping babies. "But I think Mr. Harrison might be the only one who understands the attachments, the addendums. You see, Julian, my father didn't much care for standard documents." He stared at her, a seed of doubt planted. He dismissed it as a bluff, a desperate woman's last stand. He gave a curt nod and turned to leave, not once looking back at his newborn children. The moment the door clicked shut, Amelia reached for her phone and made the second most important call of her life. "Mr. Harrison," she said, her voice clear and strong. "It's Amelia Davenport. It's time. Julian just served the papers. Please, execute my father's wishes." On the other end of the line, she heard the old lawyer take a deep, satisfying breath. "With the utmost pleasure, Amelia. With the utmost pleasure. The trap was set a long time ago. He just walked right into it." Arthur Harrison was a man who seemed to be woven from tweed and old leather. At 72, he had a mind as sharp as a barrister's quill, and a loyalty to the Sterling family that was absolute. He had been there when Robert Sterling built his empire from the ground up, and he had been there to help Robert protect it for the one person he loved more than life itself, his daughter, Amelia. When Amelia called Harrison, felt a grim satisfaction. He had warned Robert about Julian Davenport. He'd seen the avarice in the young man's eyes, the carefully concealed ambition that had nothing to do with love. Robert had seen it too. "He's going to hurt her, Arthur," Robert had said one afternoon months before the wedding. They were in his study, a room filled with the scent of mahogany and aged paper. "But if I forbid it, she'll resent me and run right to him. She has to learn this lesson herself, but she doesn't have to learn it unprotected. We need to prepare." And prepare they did. Julian's high-priced lawyers had drafted the prenuptial agreement. It was a standard, almost lazy document for people of their wealth bracket. It stipulated a clean 50-50 split of all wealth generated or inherited by Amelia during the course of the marriage. It seemed straightforward. Julian's lawyers were smug. Harrison had reviewed it, suggested a few minor, seemingly inconsequential tweaks, and then signed off on it. What Julian and his legal team never knew was that the prenup was a decoy, a piece of cheese in a much larger, more complex trap. The real power lay in a separate, private document, the Robert Sterling Legacy Trust. This was Harrison's masterpiece, drafted under Robert's meticulous, paranoid, and brilliant guidance. It was an irrevocable trust established upon Robert's death that became the legal vessel for the entirety of the Sterling fortune. Amelia wasn't just an heiress who had inherited a lump sum of stock and cash. She was the primary beneficiary of a trust with a complex set of rules governing the distribution and control of its assets. After his call with Amelia, Harrison unlocked the Sterling file from his fireproof safe. He pulled out the thick vellum-bound document. His old eyes scanned the key clauses, the ones he and Robert had spent weeks perfecting. Clause 12B, the Fidelity Proviso. This was Harrison's elegant little addition. It stated that the prenuptial agreement between Amelia Sterling and Julian Davenport would be rendered null and void in its entirety upon verified proof of marital infidelity on the part of Julian Davenport. All claims to assets accrued during the marriage would be forfeited. It was a moral dagger hidden in the legalese. Clause 17A, the Progeny Mandate. This was the heart of Robert's plan. It stipulated that upon the birth of Amelia's first legal child or children, 90% of the trust's liquid assets and controlling shares in Sterling Industries would be immediately and irrevocably transferred into a new, separate sub-trust, the Sterling Grandchildren's Fund. Amelia would have a generous, staggeringly generous stipend for life, but the bulk of the fortune, the real power, would belong to her children. She was to be its steward, its guardian, but not its owner. Clause 21C, the Guardianship Disqualification. This was the kill shot. It explicitly named Amelia Sterling as the sole trustee and financial guardian of the Grandchildren's Fund. It went on to state in language as cold and hard as granite that in the event of a divorce initiated due to the stipulations of Clause 12B, the infidelity clause Julian Davenport would be permanently and without appeal disqualified from acting as a co-trustee guardian or having any legal or financial control whatsoever over the fund or its disbursements. He would have no access to his children's fortune. Harrison smiled. Julian thought he was divorcing a wealthy woman to take half her money. In reality, he was divorcing the mother of 3 incredibly wealthy children, and in doing so, legally castrating himself from the very fortune he sought to plunder. He had been so focused on the prenup, the decoy document, that he had never bothered to investigate the intricate structure of the trust from which Amelia's money actually flowed. Harrison picked up the phone and dialed his litigation team. "It's happening," he said, his voice humming with energy. "File the preliminary injunction against all of Mr. Davenport's personal and business assets. Cite breach of contract on the prenup. And schedule an emergency hearing with the probate court. I want Judge Evelyn Reed if you can get her. She eats arrogant men like him for breakfast." The pieces were in motion. The trap was about to spring. The preliminary hearing was set for a week later. It was a whirlwind of activity for Amelia. She was discharged from the hospital, bringing her 3 tiny, perfect babies home to the cold, cavernous mansion. With Sarah's help, she turned the master suite into a fortress of motherhood, a warm, safe nursery far removed from Julian's empty study and the ghosts of their failed marriage. She was exhausted, hormonal, and overwhelmed, but every time she looked at Liam, Olivia, and Noah, she felt a resolve that was as strong as tempered steel. Julian had been bombarding her with texts and emails from his lawyer, all dripping with condescending confidence. They accused her of emotional delay tactics and urged her to see reason and sign the generous settlement. On the morning of the hearing, Chloe Vance posted a photo on her Instagram. It was a selfie of her and Julian clinking champagne glasses on a private jet. The caption read, "The future is bright, off to a quick celebration before we tie up some loose ends. Unbothered, #new beginnings, #winning. The post was a deliberate, cruel jab, and it spread like wildfire through their social circle. To the outside world, it looked like Julian Davenport had won. He had the young, beautiful new woman and was about to secure a fortune that would make him one of the most powerful men in the city. In the sterile, imposing courtroom, that same arrogance was on full display. Julian sat at the plaintiff's table dressed in a bespoke charcoal suit, looking cool and confident. Chloe had taken a seat in the front row of the gallery, her expression one of smug triumph, as if she were a queen watching a victorious joust. Julian's lawyer, a slick, pinstriped man named Marcus Thorne, shuffled his papers with an air of bored inevitability. Amelia entered from the other side, looking pale but composed. She wore a simple navy blue dress, her hair pulled back neatly. Beside her, Arthur Harrison looked less like a high-powered litigator and more like a kindly old professor. Thorne barely gave them a glance. Judge Evelyn Reed entered the courtroom. She was a woman in her late 50s with sharp, intelligent eyes and a reputation for having zero tolerance for nonsense. She surveyed the room, her gaze lingering for a moment on Chloe's ostentatious display in the gallery. "Mr. Thorne," she began, her voice crisp. "State your case for this emergency hearing." Thorne stood radiating confidence. "Your Honor, this is a simple matter. My client, Mr. Julian Davenport, and the respondent, Mrs. Amelia Davenport, have a clear and binding prenuptial agreement. Mrs. Davenport has recently given birth to their 3 children, and Mr. Davenport has filed for a divorce. We have presented a settlement offer in accordance with the prenup, a 50% division of all assets Mrs. Davenport inherited after the marriage commenced. A sum of approximately $250 million. However, the respondent, likely suffering from postpartum emotional distress, is refusing to cooperate. We are here to ask the court to enforce the terms of the agreement and expedite the proceedings." Judge Reed looked over at Amelia's table. "Mr. Harrison, is your client suffering from postpartum emotional distress?" Harrison rose slowly to his feet. My client is suffering from a profound disappointment in her husband's character, Your Honor, but her mental faculties are perfectly intact. As for the prenuptial agreement Mr. Thorne finds so simple, we contend that it is in fact null and void. A murmur went through the courtroom. Thorne scoffed audibly. On what grounds the document is ironclad? On the grounds of Clause 12B of the Robert Sterling Legacy Trust. Harrison said, his voice calm and steady. A document to which the prenup is legally subordinate. A document, I might add, that Mr. Thorne has clearly never read. He placed a thick bound volume on the table. And we have ample evidence to support our claim, including sworn affidavits from staff photographs and credit card statements proving Mr. Davenport's ongoing infidelity with a Ms. Chloe Vance, who I see has graced us with her presence today. He gestured vaguely toward the gallery. Chloe's smug smile vanished, replaced by a flush of angry red. Julian shot her a furious look. For the first time, a crack appeared in his perfect, confident facade. Judge Reed leaned forward, her interest clearly piqued. The Robert Sterling Legacy Trust. I am not familiar with this document's relevance to the prenuptial agreement. Allow me to enlighten the court, Your Honor. Harrison said, a faint smile playing on his lips. It is not merely relevant, it is everything. The air in the courtroom was a study in contrasts. On one side, Julian Davenport radiated a restless, predatory confidence. He leaned over to his lawyer, Marcus Thorne, and whispered something, a smirk playing on his lips. This was the final hurdle, a mere formality, before he could begin his new life. Thorne, a man whose career was built on the ruthless efficiency of such proceedings, shared his client's assurance. He viewed Arthur Harrison as a relic from a bygone era, and this mysterious trust document as a desperate, flimsy shield that would be swatted away by the clear, modern language of their ironclad prenup. This hearing wasn't a battle. It was a simple execution. On the other side, Amelia Sterling sat with a quiet, almost unnerving stillness. Her strength was not in aggression, but in a profound, sorrowful resolve. Beside her, Arthur Harrison stood with the weight of a promise he had made to a dear, departed friend. He was not here to argue. He was here to reveal a truth that had been etched into a legal document years ago, a truth waiting patiently for this exact moment to be brought into the light. Mr. Harrison, Judge Evelyn Reed said, her voice cutting through the expectant silence, her sharp eyes missing nothing. You have made a significant claim that your client's prenuptial agreement is subordinate to this family trust. The court is listening. Please substantiate. With pleasure, Your Honor. Harrison began, his voice calm and resonant. He held up the thick, leather-bound portfolio. Mr. Thorne and his client, Mr. Davenport, have operated under the assumption that the prenuptial agreement is the primary document governing the dissolution of this marriage. This assumption is, with all due respect, the result of a profound and deliberate misdirection. Thorne shot to his feet. Objection, Mr. Harrison is casting aspersions. The prenup is a legally binding contract signed by both parties. An observation that is both true and irrelevant, Mr. Thorne, Judge Reed stated coolly, not even glancing at him. A priorly established irrevocable trust can indeed set conditions that impact subsequent contracts entered into by its beneficiaries. I suggest you sit down and listen. Your objection is overruled. Proceed, Mr. Harrison. Thorne sat, a flush of angry red creeping up his neck. The first crack had appeared in his fortress of confidence. Thank you, Your Honor, Harrison continued. The prenup was never the fortress Mr. Davenport believed it to be. It was the maze designed to attract and occupy a mind focused solely on a direct path to wealth. The fortress, the true seat of power, has always been the Robert Sterling Legacy Trust. It is the constitution by which the Sterling estate is governed. I would now like to direct the court's attention to the specific articles of that constitution that are relevant today. He methodically put on a pair of reading glasses, the simple act heightening the tension. Let us begin with the immediate matter of Mr. Davenport's financial claim, which is predicated on the validity of the prenup. I present Clause 12b, the fidelity proviso. His voice was steady, each word landing with the weight of a stone. Should the marriage between my daughter Amelia Sterling and Julian Davenport be dissolved as a result of a material breach of the marriage contract, including but not limited to proven marital infidelity on the part of Mr. Davenport, the pre-existing prenuptial agreement dated May 12, 2022, shall be rendered null and void in its entirety. All claims by Mr. Davenport to any portion of the assets governed by this trust, or to any assets accrued by the beneficiary during the marriage, are hereby forfeited. The words settled into the silent courtroom. Forfeited. Void. A gasp rippled through the gallery. Thorne looked as if he had been punched, his mind racing, searching for a loophole, an appeal, anything. He saw none. He had been so focused on the prenup's text that he never bothered to check for an asterisk, and this clause was an asterisk the size of a meteor. Julian, however, reacted not with fear, but with indignant rage. "That's outrageous," he snarled, half rising from his chair. "My personal life has no bearing on a financial contract. This is an invasion of privacy. It's medieval." "It is Mr. Davenport," Judge Reed interjected, her voice dangerously quiet. "A legally binding condition, which you inadvertently accepted when you married a beneficiary of this trust. Please control yourself, or I will have you removed." Julian sank back into his chair, his face a thunderous mask of fury. In the gallery, Chloe Vance's polished smile had vanished. Her mind was a flurry of cold calculations. The $250 million payout, the bedrock of the entire enterprise, was gone. This was a serious complication. "But the voiding of the prenup is in fact the least of Mr. Davenport's concerns," Harrison announced, turning a page. His entire strategy was based on a fatal flaw in his understanding of the asset structure itself. He believed he was divorcing a woman in possession of a great fortune. This brings us to Clause 17a, the progeny mandate. Harrison looked directly at Julian, whose eyes were narrowed with hate. "Upon the birth of my daughter's first legal issue, 90% of the trust's principal assets, including all controlling shares of Sterling Industries, shall be immediately and irrevocably transferred to a newly established protected subtrust to be known as the Sterling Grandchildren's Fund." If the first clause was a gunshot, this was an earthquake. It reordered the entire landscape. The sound in the room seemed to warp and die in Julian's ears. He felt a cold dread creep up his spine. The money. It wasn't hers. Since the moment the triplets were born, the vast majority of the Sterling Empire had legally belonged to them. He saw their 3 tiny faces in his mind, no longer heirs to a fortune he could control, but 3 living, breathing vaults, to which he had just lost the key. He had been trying to rob a bank that had moved its holdings a week ago. Across the room, Amelia closed her eyes for a brief moment. This wasn't victory. It was the confirmation of a devastating truth. Julian had never seen her, only the dollar signs that floated around her like a halo. Chloe's mind worked with the chilling efficiency of a CEO liquidating a failed asset. Julian was no longer her partner in a glorious future. He was a disgraced, bankrupt father of 3 with no access to their funds. The association was now toxic. Her brand, her reputation, her very future depended on immediate and decisive disengagement. Her hand, which had been resting on her Hermes handbag, became still. Her decision was made. Julian's desperate voice cracked the silence. They are my children, my blood. The Davenport name, as their father, I am their natural guardian. Their fortune is my responsibility. A predictable, patriarchal, and legally baseless assumption. Harrison said, his voice turning to ice as he delivered the final fatal stroke, which Robert Sterling foresaw and made provisions against with what I must say is remarkable prescience. I give you finally Clause 21C, the guardianship disqualification. He let the silence hang for a moment before reading the words that would end it all. Amelia Sterling Davenport shall be appointed sole trustee of the Sterling Grandchildren's Fund, with complete and autonomous control over its management and disbursement. In the event that the stipulations of Clause 12B are met, that is a divorce resulting from Mr. Davenport's infidelity, Julian Davenport is hereby and in perpetuity disqualified from acting as a co-trustee financial guardian or from holding any authority signatory or otherwise over the aforementioned fund. He shall have no legal access to his children's inheritance. It was over. The trap was not just sprung. It was a masterpiece of legal devastation. Julian Davenport, a man defined by power and control, had been rendered utterly and irrevocably impotent. He finally broke. A raw, guttural sound tore from his throat as he lunged to his feet, his face contorted in a mask of primal rage. No, he can't do this. A dead man can't control my life, my children. He poisoned her mind against me. He's reaching from the grave to ruin me. Before the bailiffs could intervene, Harrison raised his hand for silence. Your Honor, Mr. Sterling anticipated this reaction as well. He left one final item, a letter for his daughter. Judge Reed gave a solemn nod. The courtroom fell silent, Julian's ragged breaths the only sound. Harrison's voice softened, taking on a tone of profound intimacy as he read Robert Sterling's final words. My dearest Amelia, if you are hearing this, it means my worst fears have come true, and the man you trusted has broken your heart. Know this first, it is not your fault. Men blinded by greed are capable of great deception. I did not create this trust to control you, my love, but to protect you. I knew I would not always be there to guard your heart, so I resolved to guard your future and the future of your children instead. This fortune is not a weapon. It is a shield. It is the means for you to build a life of your own choosing, free from any man who would see you as a prize to be won, rather than a woman to be cherished. He may have been your husband, but these children are Sterling's. They are your legacy, and now you are their fierce protector. Be strong. Be happy. Know that your father loves you always. A single tear slid down Amelia's cheek. Then another. They were not tears of sadness, but of a love so powerful it had transcended death itself to protect her. The raw, honest emotion of the letter was the final cue. In the gallery, Chloe Vance stood up with a quiet, deliberate grace. She did not look at the weeping Amelia or the sputtering, broken Julian. Her expression was one of cool disinterest, as if a tedious play had finally reached its conclusion. She turned, and with measured steps walked out of the courtroom, her departure a silent, brutal verdict of its own. Julian watched her go, the last vestige of his imagined future, walking out the door. The fight drained out of him, replaced by a vast black emptiness. He collapsed into his chair, a hollowed-out effigy of the man who had walked in that morning utterly and completely defeated. The click of Chloe Vance's heels on the marble courthouse floor was a sound of finality, an acoustic full stop on the life Julian Davenport had so meticulously planned. He remained slumped in his chair, the echoes of Robert Sterling's letter fading in the vast, silent courtroom. His lawyer Marcus Thorne was muttering about appeals and legal challenges, but the words were hollow, meaningless gusts of air. Julian wasn't listening. He was watching the ghost of a $250 million fortune dissipate before his eyes, taking with it the glamorous, effortless future he had felt was his by right. He staggered to his feet and followed Thorne out into the grand rotunda, his legs feeling unsteady. He expected to see Amelia, perhaps, to offer one last desperate plea or a venomous threat. But she and Arthur Harrison had already been discreetly escorted out a side entrance shielded from the brewing storm. Instead, he saw Chloe. She wasn't fleeing. She was waiting for him by the main doors, her arms crossed her face, a mask of glacial fury. The reporters held at bay outside were a testament to the scandal that was about to break. "What was that, Julian?" she hissed, her voice low and serrated. "What in the hell was that? A simple prenup, you said. Ironclad, you said. You didn't just lose. You were humiliated. You were played for a fool by a dead man." "Chloe, listen." He began reaching for her arm. "This is a setback. My lawyer says we can fight it. We can argue undue influence contest the trust." She snatched her arm away, as if his touch were toxic. There is no we," she spat the words sharp as shards of glass. "I attached my name to a winner, a titan of industry poised to take over this city. Not some bankrupt idiot who got outsmarted by his late father-in-law. You have nothing, Julian. Less than nothing. You have debt, you have disgrace, and you have 3 screaming infants you can't even use for a payday. You are a liability." Every word was a calculated blow striking at the core of his pride. "After everything I promised you, you're just going to walk away?" he asked, his voice cracking with a pathetic mix of disbelief and rage. Chloe let out a short, bitter laugh. "The promises were based on a lie, weren't they? You promised me the Sterling fortune, not the Davenport debt. I have a brand to maintain, a lifestyle to protect. You can't give me that anymore. In fact, being seen with you right now is probably costing me my next opportunity." She looked him up and down, her eyes filled with a chilling, transactional disgust. "Goodbye, Julian. I hope you enjoy your new life. I hear New Jersey is lovely this time of year." Without another glance, she turned and pushed through the heavy doors, stepping out into a flashbulb-lit reality, where she would immediately begin distancing herself from him, recasting herself as another of his victims. Julian watched her go, the woman for whom he had torched his life, disappearing into a taxi without a flicker of remorse. He was utterly, devastatingly alone. The dismantling of Julian Davenport happened not with a single crash, but with the methodical grinding sound of a machine being taken apart, piece by painful piece. The news of the court hearing spread through the city's financial and social ecosystems, like a virus. His phone usually buzzing with calls from investors, and invitations fell silent. When he tried to call his partners, he was met with the crisp, impenetrable wall of their secretaries. An emergency board meeting was called at his firm, Davenport Capital. He wasn't invited. By the end of the week, he had been forced out of the company that bore his name, his partners invoking a moral turpitude clause in their agreement to sever his shares for a pittance. 2 weeks after the hearing, while he was sitting in the sterile white living room of the Tribeca penthouse, a bottle of scotch. His only companion. The doorbell rang. It wasn't a friend or a colleague. It was a court-appointed marshal flanked by two grim-faced men in suits. They handed him a thick stack of papers, a court order enacted by Harrison on behalf of the trust freezing all of his personal and business assets. The penthouse, they informed him, was being seized. Its lease had been secured, with funds directly traceable to Amelia's accounts. He watched in a numb stupor as they walked through the opulent apartment, placing small official stickers on everything of value. The abstract paintings, the Italian leather sofa, the state-of-the-art entertainment system. They took the keys to his Maserati and his Range Rover from the bowl on the counter. They even made him remove his Patek Philippe watch, tagging it as a marital asset purchased during the marriage. He was allowed one suitcase of personal effects. As he packed his clothes, the remnants of a life he thought he had built, he could hear them in the other room, inventorying the spoils of his spectacular failure. His social ruin was just as swift. He tried to have a drink at the Metropolitan Club, a place where his name had once guaranteed him the best table, only to be politely but firmly informed by the maitre d' that his membership had been suspended. Old friends would see him on the street and suddenly become engrossed in their phones or cross to the other side to avoid making eye contact. He was no longer Julian Davenport, the charismatic financier. He was a punchline, a cautionary tale. He was the man who had it all and lost it because he got too greedy. For Amelia, the period after the hearing was one of profound and challenging creation. Her first act was to abandon the gilded cage Julian had built. The sprawling mansion, with its cold marble floors and silent, echoing rooms, felt haunted by the ghost of her marriage. It wasn't a home. It was a monument to a lie. With Sarah's help, she packed only what was essential. Her personal belongings, the mountain of baby supplies, and the few items that held sentimental value from her father. She walked out the front door without a backward glance, instructing Mr. Harrison to sell the property and all its contents immediately. She found her sanctuary in a beautiful 4-story brownstone in Park Slope, Brooklyn. It had a small garden in the back, large bay windows that flooded the rooms with sunlight, and a warmth that the mansion had always lacked. The house needed work, but that was what Amelia craved, a project that was entirely her own. She threw herself into the renovation not as a client, but as a creator. She spent her nights while the Triplets slept, poring over architectural plans and design swatches. She wasn't just decorating a house, she was building a home, a fortress of warmth and love for her new family. The master suite was transformed into a serene, functional nursery for 3. 3 identical cribs, a comfortable rocking chair for late-night feedings, and a mobile of hand-painted stars hanging from the ceiling. Life was a chaotic, relentless, and beautiful whirlwind. It was a symphony of crying, cooing, and laughter. It was the logistical nightmare of coordinating 3 feeding schedules, the endless mountain of laundry, and the bone-deep exhaustion of sleepless nights. But in the quiet moments when she sat in the rocking chair with a baby snuggled against her chest, another in a bassinet by her feet, and the third sleeping soundly in his crib, she felt a sense of peace and purpose that she had never known. This was real. This was hers. Her first and only significant interaction with Julian came 2 months after the hearing. It was time for his first court-ordered supervised visitation. The meeting took place in a sterile, impersonal room at a family services center. The walls were painted a faded yellow, and the floor was littered with worn-out plastic toys. Amelia arrived with the 3 babies in their carrier seats, looking composed and calm. Julian was already there, looking gaunt and tired. His expensive suit was gone, replaced by ill-fitting slacks and a generic polo shirt. He looked like a stranger. A court-appointed supervisor, a kindly-looking woman named Mrs. Gable, sat in the corner observing. You can take them out," Amelia said, her voice neutral, as she unbuckled Liam from his seat. Julian reached out with hesitant, awkward hands. He had never held his children before. He picked up Liam, who, sensing a stranger's unfamiliar hold, immediately began to cry. Julian froze, looking utterly helpless. He tried to soothe the baby, but his movements were stiff, his voice uncertain. Olivia and Noah, sensing their brother's distress, started to fuss as well. The small room filled with the sound of wailing infants. "Here," Amelia said, stepping forward. She expertly took Liam, settled him against her shoulder, and began to rock him gently, her voice a soft, soothing hum. The crying subsided almost instantly. She looked at Julian, and for the first time he seemed to see the chasm that had opened between them. It wasn't just about money or infidelity anymore. She was a mother bonded to these children by instinct and endless hours of care. He was a biological father, a title with no meaning, no connection. He sat there for the remainder of the 2 hours, mostly in silence, watching her effortlessly care for the 3 lives he had intended to use as leverage. As she packed them up to leave, he finally spoke. "Amelia," he said, his voice raspy. "I'm sorry." She paused at the door, her back to him. "For what, Julian? For the cheating, for the lies, for trying to take my children's inheritance." "For all of it," he mumbled, looking at the floor. She turned her head slightly. "No, you're not," she said, her voice devoid of malice, filled only with a profound, weary clarity. "You're not sorry you did it. You're just sorry you failed. There's a difference." She walked out without another word, leaving him alone in the room of sad, faded toys. With her home life finding its rhythm, Amelia turned her attention to her other great responsibility, the Sterling legacy. She was no longer a passive beneficiary. She was the sole trustee, the guardian of an empire. She called a meeting with Mr. Harrison and the board of Sterling Industries. She walked into the familiar wood-paneled boardroom where her father had reigned for 40 years. The old guard, the men who had known her as Robert's little girl, looked at her with a mixture of sympathy and skepticism. They expected her to appoint a proxy to let them handle the real business. She stood at the head of the table, poised and prepared. "Good morning, gentlemen," she began, her voice steady and clear. "First, I want to thank you all for your stewardship of the company during this transitional period. As of today, however, the transition is over." She laid out her vision not with emotional appeals, but with data projections and a keen understanding of the market that stunned them into silence. She announced her plan to diversify the company's holdings, to create a new division focused on sustainable technologies, and to establish the Sterling Family Foundation, a philanthropic arm that would be the company's new public face. "My father built this company on a foundation of integrity and innovation," she concluded, her eyes sweeping across the faces of the board members. "I intend to honor that legacy not by preserving it in amber, but by making it a force for good in the 21st century. Sterling Industries will be profitable, but it will also be purposeful. I am not my father, gentlemen, but I am his daughter. I expect your full support." In that moment, any doubt about her ability to lead vanished. They saw not an heiress, but a leader. Robert Sterling's foresight hadn't just protected her fortune, it had unlocked her potential. One crisp autumn afternoon, a year after the triplets were born, Amelia was in the park. The brownstone was filled with the happy chaos of 3 toddlers learning to walk, but here under the canopy of red and gold leaves, there was a moment of peace. Liam was determinedly trying to climb the small slide. Olivia was examining a ladybug on a leaf, with intense concentration, and Noah was chasing a pigeon with delighted squeals. Amelia sat on a bench watching them, a soft smile on her face. Her life was full, demanding, and profoundly happy. She had found a strength she never knew she possessed, a purpose that animated her every action. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Sarah containing a link to a celebrity gossip website. Amelia almost deleted it, but her curiosity got the better of her. The headline read, "From penthouse to pavement, disgraced financier Julian Davenport spotted hustling at a New Jersey luxury car dealership." Below it was a grainy paparazzi photo. There was Julian wearing a dealership-branded blazer that was slightly too tight in the shoulders. He was leaning against a gleaming black convertible, a forced, practiced smile plastered on his face as he talked to a potential customer. The charm was still there, but it was a hollowed-out, desperate version of what it once was. He looked smaller, older, a man haunted by the colossal scale of his own failure. Amelia stared at the photo for a long moment. A year ago, a sight like this would have filled her with a bitter, triumphant satisfaction. But now she felt a surprising, quiet wave of nothing. Not pity, not anger, not joy. Just a profound and complete indifference. He was a character from a book she had finished long ago. His story had no bearing on hers anymore. She locked her phone and slipped it into her pocket. She looked up at her children, her beautiful, thriving, happy children. Her legacy. Her father's letter echoed in her mind. This fortune is not a weapon. It is a shield. He was right. It had shielded her, and now it would shield them. But it was more than that. It was a foundation. She stood up and walked over to her children, scooping Noah up into her arms as he giggled. The fortune papers had been read, the old world had been burned to the ground, and from the ashes she had built an empire of her own, not of glass and steel, but of love, resilience, and a future that was blindingly, brilliantly bright. And so Amelia Sterling's new life began, not defined by the man who betrayed her, but forged by the love of the father who protected her, and the 3 precious children who gave her strength. Her story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest acts of love are the plans laid in secret, the foresight that guards us even when we can't see the danger ourselves. It's a testament to the fact that true wealth isn't about money, but about resilience, integrity, and the unbreakable bond of family. If Amelia's journey from heartbreak to victory moved you, and if you believe in the power of a parent's love to triumph over greed and deceit, please show your support. Hit that like button to let us know this story resonated with you. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell so you won't miss our next story. Thank you for listening.